Hey guys, welcome back. We're here again from the SEA to teach you guys another cool lesson about the nature out here in New Hampshire. So this week's lesson is going to be about food webs. But before we get too far into it, we're going to do a little bit of a review from our lesson last week. So you all may remember this guy from last week. This is the ermine. This little animal has lots of winter adaptations that we talked about in our last lesson. Does anybody remember any of them? You can go ahead and pause the video for a little extra time to come up with ideas, and then we can share some of the ones that we thought of. All right, I bet you all came up with some great adaptations for this animal. Some that we thought of were warm fur, seasonal colors, meaning they change colors based on the weather throughout the year, sharp teeth for hunting, and eyes on the front of its head to help it with finding and catching its prey. So now that we've done a little review, we're all going to tell you about food chains and food webs and how some of these animals fall in with these interactions.
So we will start off with learning about food chains. And food chains just show the order that living things depend on each other for food. So you can see in this example, we have squirrels, which eat berries, and then we have bobcats that eat squirrels. So they're in a nice little chain there. And this food chain shows a predator-prey relationship. So prey are animals that are hunted by others for food. And predators are animals that survive by eating other animals. So now I have two questions for you. Which of these is the predator in this food chain, and which of these is the prey? And you can pause the video to answer these questions. So the bobcat in this example is the predator because it survives by eating the squirrel. And that makes the squirrel the prey because it's hunted by the bobcat for food. And this is just an example of food chains and predator-prey relationships.
So here we have another example of a slightly different food chain. And in this slide, we are concerned about where the different steps along the food chain get their energy. So here we have producers, and producers can produce their own energy from the sun. So all of the energy that we have here on Earth eventually comes from the sun, and plants can produce their own energy via a process called photosynthesis that we will talk about more in a later week. And if an organism is not a producer, it must be a consumer. And those must eat other animals or plants and cannot produce their own energy. So from these two, I'm going to ask you all, which of these is the producer and which is the consumer? Give you a second to answer that. So here we have the producer being the grasses, and all plants on Earth are producers because they can all produce their own energy from the sun. And all of the animals, the mouse, the ermine, and the red fox, are all consumers because they must consume other things in order to get their energy. They cannot produce their own.
All right, so now we have another question for you guys, and that is, what do you think would happen if one part of the food chain was missing? So if there were no predators to catch the prey or no prey for the predators to catch, how would that affect the ecosystem they fall into? We'll give you guys some time if you want to pause the video, and then we will share some of the examples that we thought of. So the main example that we thought of what would happen if part of the food chain was removed is overpopulation. Oh dear. This would happen if you were to get rid of the predators within an ecosystem. Without the predators, who only eat the meat of other animals, there would be a massive increase in the number of prey. You can see here that we have a photo of a large group of deer who serve as the prey for many animals. Without their predators, the deer would be able to grow in population size, which would then affect the amount of plants within an area, as they tend to eat grass and other plants. This is just one example of what happens when these food chains are interrupted, and as you can see, each member of a food chain is extremely important to the ecosystem in which they fall.
Okay, so now that we went over food chains, we can go into food webs. And a food web is just a group of food chains interacting in an ecosystem. And you can see an example of a food web on this slide that's made up of the previous two food chains that we went over with you. So we have the sun giving energy to the grasses and the berries, and those are our producers. And then those producers give energy to the mice and the squirrels that eat them, making them consumers. And mice and squirrels are both eaten by the ermine, which, as we talked about in the fur lesson, might not only just eat these animals, but might steal their homes as well. And the ermine is another example of a consumer. And finally, our top predator in this food web is the red fox. And the red fox will eat the ermine, mice, and squirrels. So it's our predator in this food web. And you can see that the food web is just the different relationships between different food chains. So now that we've introduced the idea of food webs to you guys, we can talk about exactly how related everything in a food web is. And there are different ways to label what's in a food web based on what they eat. So first, we have our herbivores, and these are animals that only eat plants. For example, our mouse there will only eat plants like grasses. Next up, we have our carnivores, which are animals that only eat meat. And our ermine is an example of a carnivore because it will only eat meat like the mice and the squirrels that are on this slide. And finally, we have our omnivores, and these are animals that eat plants and other living things. So our top predator, our red fox, eats ermines, mice, and squirrels like we talked about before, but red foxes also will eat berries and other plants. So that makes the red fox an omnivore. And this example of a food web shows you how kind of complex that food webs are in comparison of food chains, and how one thing can definitely impact the others, like Rita talked about with overpopulation.
All right, so now that we have a pretty good idea about what a food web is, we have an activity for you all. So we want you all to draw a picture of a food web that includes you in it. So take a minute and think about what foods you like to eat and where those foods come from in nature. For example, berries come from bushes, and if you like to eat bread, that comes from wheat. I, for example, really like to eat beans. So here's an example of what my food web would look like. It starts with the sun, as they always do. And then you may not know this, but beans grow in pods that look like this. And then here's me. So take a minute and draw your food web, and then go ahead and share it with the class so that everyone can see what everybody's food web looks like.
All right, so now we're going to put it all together. And as you guys have all seen, there are many different animals that have different adaptations that are based heavily on their diet and place within their food chain. So some extra examples that we've thought of these types of adaptations are sharp claws. As you can see, we have a photo of a bobcat claw, which is very, very sharp. These claws will help the bobcat in hunting their prey. We also have silent feathers. You can see in the top corner, there's a barred owl. And this barred owl is a prime example of an animal that uses these silent feathers as a strategy. Their feathers allow them to fly silently through the air, which helps them sneak up on their prey, who often have their own adaptations that help them hear sounds that you and I never could. So we have another example of a prey adaptation, and that is in the eye placement. This picture of a deer is a great example of how eye location will help prey detect their predators before they can be hunted. With eyes on the side of their head, the deer are able to see things that are coming from the side or behind, which will help them escape their predators. And now our final example of an adaptation that will help these predators and preys is camouflage. As you can see, this turtle has a shell that looks quite similar to the wood on the log on which it sits. This wood turtle is using its own body to help it blend in with its habitat, which helps it hide from its predators.
Hey Rita.
Hey Jackson.
So it was super cool learning about predator and prey recently.
And food chains and food webs.
Yeah, but what does that actually look like in terms of an animal?
Well, Jackson, lucky for us, we have all of these cool skulls to show us.
Whoa, skulls, that's so cool. Are they real?
They're not real. They're made out of resin.
Oh.
However, they do show the proper size and shape of the animals that they're meant to represent.
Oh, so this guy must have been pretty big then.
Definitely. Actually, you can tell whether or not most of these were predators or prey based on the way that their teeth are and where their eyes are located.
Whoa, so you can tell what kind of animal it is based entirely on its skull?
Mm-hmm.
That's super cool. I can't wait to learn more. This first animal that we're going to be looking at today is the biggest animal we have in New Hampshire. You probably recognize it by its large antlers and huge skull. It's a moose. In fact, the word moose comes from the native Algonquin term meaning eater of twigs. And they are herbivores, so they only eat plants. They love to eat leaves, bark, and shrubs. You can see that the moose has a very long face with two different sets of teeth. So in the front, it has these incisors that it uses to chew off food and collect it from trees and things like that. And then in the back, it has these rough and jagged molars that are used to chew up its plant-based food. In fact, this moose skull is the only skull that we have in our collection that belongs to a real animal, and that is pretty cool.
Okay, the next animal we have is pretty fierce, and you guys can try and guess what skull this is. So this skull is a bobcat, and bobcats are carnivores, meaning that they only eat other animals. Now the skull of a bobcat is well adapted to hunting in a few different ways. First, you can see that the eyes of a bobcat point straight forward, and this helps them to track prey while it might be chasing them in a hunt or something. It also has very sharp teeth that help it to kill and chew its prey. And you can see all of the very sharp teeth on the bottom and the top. And you can see how different teeth are useful for different kinds of diets with all of these skulls that we're showing you today.
So this next animal we're going to look at is one of the smallest predators we have in New Hampshire. A hint about what it is that in the winter it has white fur, but in the summer and fall it has brown fur to blend in with its surroundings. Does anybody have any guesses? That's right, it's the ermine. This small predator is actually quite skilled at catching its prey, eating small rodents such as mice and rabbits. If you look closely, you can see it has very sharp incisor teeth, along with these very sharp canines. He is missing one right here. However, you can see this one is very, very sharp, along with his bottom teeth, which are also very, very sharp. And he's able to use these in order to kill his prey, often within a single bite, as they usually bite directly on the neck of their prey with these extremely sharp teeth. While it is tiny, the ermine is a very ferocious predator.
So the next animal we have builds dams and lives in lodges, and we've talked about this one quite a bit. So does anyone have any guesses as to what this little guy is? Okay, and this skull actually belongs to a beaver. Look at these huge orange teeth. They're really distinctive for the beaver. This color does not come from beavers forgetting to brush their teeth. They are actually orange because of a protective iron coating that is on them, and this coating is to strengthen them for all the trees they chew down. The interesting thing is, though, that the backs of their teeth, right here, actually do not have this iron. This actually helps them to wear down faster and create a sharper angle and sharper teeth overall. You can kind of see that angle there that it forms as they are chewing down all their trees. Now, unlike humans, their teeth actually continue to grow forever because of how much they get worn down in the process of all that chewing they do. Beavers are herbivores, so they only like to eat plants like trees, twigs, and shrubs, but they will also eat soft plants like grasses, ferns, and mushrooms. You can see the molars at the back of its mouth that they use to grind down all of that chewy plant food. So yes, here we have the beaver.
Look at this big guy. You might be able to tell what it is based off its size alone. Some other things that help give you a hint about what it might be are its huge teeth at the front of its mouth and the large set of molars it has in the back. It's a black bear. Although the popular idea about bears is that they're vicious predators, they actually get about 90% of their diet from plants and will only occasionally eat animals or fish when they're available. Black bears are opportunistic eaters, meaning they will eat just about anything that they can get their paws on, including berries, tree sugars, or even animal carcasses that other predators have left behind. During the fall, in preparation for the winter hibernation, a bear will spend up to 20 hours a day foraging for food so that it can build up energy. During this time, a bear will mostly eat the large variety of nuts that are available, as they are a great source of protein and fat. And I think that is very cool.
Now we're going to end it with journal time. And we want you guys to take about 5 minutes to answer these questions. So the first question, if you were a predator, what would you be and what would you eat? And the second question, what kinds of adaptations do you think your skull has? So as always, we'll give you feedback on these, so make sure to check in to your journals after you've done them. And we hope that you enjoyed this lesson and have a great rest of your day.